Sorry for the delay, guys. Ugh.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to the National Press Theatre. Before we begin, we have a few important preventative measures to share. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, we remind all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from the microphones at all times. When you're not using your earpiece, please place it down, face down, on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. Thanks for your cooperation. Bienvenue au Théâtre national de la presse. Avant de commencer, nous avons quelques mesures préventives importantes à communiquer. Pour prévenir les incidents acoustiques perturbateurs et potentiellement dangereux susceptibles de causer des blessures, nous vous rappelons à tous les participants de garder leur oreillette éloignée de tous les microphones à tout moment. Lorsque votre oreillette n'est pas utilisée, veuillez la placer face vers le bas, au milieu de l'autocollant sur la table, tel qu'indiqué par l'image. Veuillez consulter les cartes sur la table pour connaître les lignes directrices sur la prévention des incidents acoustiques. Les mesures sont en place pour protéger la santé et la sécurité de tous. Merci pour votre participation.
Merci et bonjour à tous. Je m'appelle Iqra Khalid. Je suis députée pour Mississauga Erin Mills in Ontario. And I have spent a very long time trying to understand and appreciate how we can build consensus within our society today, especially with the role that social media platforms play. I think I was I'm of a generation where I saw the internet come in. I lived a life before computers and before the internet, and have seen how the social media platforms that our young people use on a daily basis now can be a tool. It can be a tool for enhancing democracy. It can be a tool for getting information to people. It can be a tool for connecting with your loved ones and your family and sharing your lives with each other. But it can also be a tool for malicious intent. It can also be a tool for spreading hate. And in fact, Statistics Canada reported in 2022 that more than 7 in 10 young people in Canada have been exposed to online hate and violence. Cyber-related hate crimes increased in Canada by over 130% from 2018 to 2022. And that was again sourced by Statistics Canada. Among the cyber-related hate crimes, the most common types were those that target Black people, which was 17%, motivated by person's sexual orientation, 17%, and Jewish people, 12%. Nearly 1/4 of victims were aged 12 to 17. And we've seen what the impact of cyber hate can lead to, online hate. It leads to people that have died in the Quebec mosque, for example. The London massacre that happened of a family, the Danforth attack. I think that we need to do better. And what this report was really all about was building consensus and finding ways to collaborate between all levels of government, social media platforms, and individual Canadians to ensure that we are providing the safety of everybody as we use these tools, hopefully for the better and not the worse. So this report tackled a very important issue. How can we exercise better oversight of social media platforms to ensure that the information that Canadians provide to these platforms is protected and it is used appropriately and responsibly, as well as ensure online safety for everyone? The report comes out with some very key recommendations. And these recommendations complement the work that our Liberal government has already been doing, whether it is through the Online Harms Act or whether it is through banning right-wing extremist terrorist groups online, etc. I think that we do need to do more in building that collaboration and that consensus between social media platforms and all levels of government, and especially, as recommendation 7 lists in this report, ensuring that organizations like the RCMP, for example, have the proper resources to make sure that we are well educated and raise the awareness that is needed to protect ourselves online. kids often don't know that once they put data out there, once they put a photo out there, once they share their personal information online, that it's really difficult for them to retract that. And I think we need to reevaluate PIPEDA, for example, and our privacy laws to ensure that they have the ability to do that. So I really welcome this report. I think it is a positive step forward. It complements and helps what our government's current measures have been to address this very important issue. And I really look forward to all social media platforms in coming together and finding a way to keep our communities safe, to protect the data of Canadians, especially young people, and to make sure that there is enough awareness and education that people understand the implications of how we conduct ourselves online, and to create a better, safer community for everyone. Thank you for your time today, and I'm more than willing to take some questions.
We will now go to the questions. On va maintenant procéder avec les questions. Anya, de la presse canadienne.
Hi.
My fault. Hang on. Sorry, Anya.
En anglais?
Can you hear
Can
me?
you hear me now?
Yep. Go ahead.
Great. So, you mentioned that these recommendations are complementary to some of the legislation that's been proposed. Are there any recommendations that aren't in, the Online Harms Act or Bill C-27 that updates that updates PIPEDA? Like, what are the recommendations here that aren't already underway?
Well, I look forward to our government's response to these recommendations in 120 days from the tabling of this report, as it was tabled today, to make sure that everything that is covered in these recommendations is being addressed by our Liberal government, and that it is in fact complementary. Obviously, there are many implications with bills, whether it's direct or indirect, and I look forward to seeing what and how the government will respond. And I look forward to working with, quite frankly, all members in the House, because this is an issue that impacts each and every one of us in our communities.
And for my follow-up, I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit more about the recommendation on disinformation. I think that's the kind of the only piece that isn't at least broadly covered by some of the other legislation. So what would you like to see in terms of action on disinformation?
Recommendation 6 is the one that you're talking about, and I'll just say it for the record, that the Government of Canada adopt a European Union-style code of practice on disinformation and compel social media platforms to report regularly on their trust and safety activities in Canada and provide Canadian researchers with access to their data. But if we're looking at our everyday lives and how we interact with social media platforms, I think a lot of people go to social media platforms for their news, for their information, and that, for me, puts a duty on social media platforms to be able to provide that correct information, to be able to provide information that is not disinformation, that is not misinformation, and that is not malicious in its context. Now, the Ethics Committee continues to work on this issue of misinformation, disinformation, especially as it pertains to parliamentarians, for example, in relation to how online information is shared. So I think this is one of the biggest issues of our time, and one that we really need to focus on. And I'm looking forward to working with not just our Minister of Justice, but with all levels of and all different departments to make sure that we are really combating this issue in a good way.
I don't think there are any more questions. Ceci complète donc la conférence de presse. This concludes the press conference.
Oh,
Thank you.
wait.
Oh,
I actually have one more if
go
I
ahead.
can.
Go ahead.
It's about TikTok, and about the argument that, with this ban that's going to shut down its Canadian offices, that it's actually going to make it impossible or much harder to regulate TikTok. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, given the recommendations in this report, just your thoughts about this argument that it's actually going to make it more difficult to hold TikTok accountable for the issues that you're talking about in this report.
You're absolutely right. You know, when we're talking about this issue, when this whole report is about how do we protect Canadians from inappropriate data collection and what companies like TikTok do with that data. In it can be extrapolated to also what Uber is doing with the data that they're collecting and artificial intelligence, and how consumerism is really changing in that effect. But then ultimately, how are we protecting Canadians? I think that it is important for us to be strong and affirmative and assertive with social media companies to ensure that we are protecting Canadians, and how they use data collection needs to be regulated. And I'm looking forward to working with government on this issue. I think it's a really important one that impacts all Canadians today, not just Canadians, but quite frankly, democracy around the world.
Are there any other questions, Anya or Fallon? All right. Oh, yes, Anya has another question.
Okay, I promise it's the last one, but really just a quick follow-up. But like, isn't what you were talking about, the work that you were just talking about, going to be impossible or much more difficult if TikTok doesn't have anybody in Canada to talk to or work with?
Well, I really appreciated, regardless of whether I liked their answers or not, the fact that TikTok did come into this committee to give their feedback, and I think that there are ways that we can absolutely work with social media companies. Of course, having that jurisdiction, that touch point in Canada is really important, and that's why, you know, one of the things that I've advocated for is not just TikTok, but all social media platforms have a Canadian office. But we need to find ways to make sure that we are at the first and foremost protecting Canadians and their safety online. And if that means that we have to, you know, make sure that Canadians' data is not being collected and not being mishandled, then so be it. But I think that we do have a lot of work to do on this.
All right, so this officially concludes the press conference. Merci.
Thank you all very, very much today. I really appreciate your patience.